Poison Ivy, Swamp Thing, Feral Trees, issue 1. G. Willow Wilson writing with Mike Perkins on the art. Matt, take it away.
Yeah, so this is a fun Halloween style story, despite the fact that it takes place in January during the dead of winter. But it opens with a guy walking his dog in the northwest part of Gotham where there's this forest. And the dog hears something, starts barking, runs off the leash. Dog goes missing. And then the guy finds the dog's leash in a tree, right? And it's just hanging there. And as he's looking for his dog, a tree branch comes up from behind him and stabs him through the body, like the torso and everything. And then it that's kind of the end of the cold open where we get this like awesome, kind of just moody title page out of Perkins. And it transitions over to Harley and Pam sleeping in the bed, and Swamp Thing as well in the marshlands outside of Gotham, also sleeping. And there's this thing that they do throughout the issue where we get kind of Ivy's perspective and Swamp Thing's perspective. And this is Alec Holland. This isn't the Ram V, whose character I'm drawing a blank on.
Levi.
His character. Yes, Levi. It's not Levi. This is Alec Holland. And they both wake up almost as if there's been a disturbance to the green, right? And both of them are ruminating on what it means to protect, what does it mean to be alive here?
What is life? Baby, don't hurt me. Don't hurt me no more.
And throughout this issue, I'll just cut to the chase here. It shows the difference between Swamp Thing as this representative for the green and Pam, who's kind of doing her own thing. Because throughout the issue, we see some other, members of the Parliament of Trees. And then one of them calls Pam a half in, half out. And she takes umbrage to that because she's very much on the side of ecology, right? She's about the plants and the trees. That's her whole gimmick. But then as the book goes on, Swamp Thing points out to her, she's like, yeah, but we do things for the trees. You do things because the people. And at a certain point, Pam's like, well, wait, what about all the people I've tried to kill? She's like, and Swamp Thing's like, yeah, but still you're doing this to save life. It's not just about, it's about all life for you, not about the trees like it is for us. And throughout this, anytime we have, Pam and Alec, we're seeing both their different perspectives, how they're going at this. And he feels the disturbance because of the trees. So that's why he responds. She sees this and sees that the, fifth person disappears, and she's going to go find out why. As they both show up there, she suits up because she's feeling cold. She needs some protection. That's where she sees Swamp Thing, where he looks very monstrous. He's kind of in the shadows. And she feels like there's a person in there, like almost like there's someone calling out through the green. And she wants to find her. Turns out it's a woman. The deeper they go into this forest, the more things start to get weird. Like the trees are bleeding human blood, right? And this is where she feels like there's something more going on than just the trees going rogue. And Swamp Thing points out like this is different because the trees are supposed to be asleep. It's the dead of winter. They're supposed to be dormant. Why are they doing this? And they keep searching. Swamp Thing starts kind of ripping, not the trees apart, but, making a clearing through them. And they start finding bodies. And it's a lot more than the 5 people who have gone missing. The trees start attacking Pam, and they won't respond to her. There's almost something that's blocking both Swamp Thing and Ivy's powers from working on the trees. So they end up falling into this hole where they end up kind of in the root system, and they come across this character who Alec calls the Kettle Hole Devil. So I did a deep dive, and I haven't read the Alan Moore Swamp Thing, but apparently this is a member of the Parliament of the Trees that in Moore's story, he was a union organizer in Chicago that was also working at a brewery, and the the business didn't like that he was trying to unionize, so they killed him and threw him into like this fermenting hops, and that because of him and what he stood for, the Parliament chose him to be a Swamp Thing, right? And so here Alec mentions like, oh, I haven't seen him in forever, and he's like, oh yeah, I've been around. But in the Alan Moore story, he ended up becoming like this understanding that the Parliament's trying to have of humanity, where he kind of represents the idea of industrialization, right? That you can industrialize, but also keep nature in mind, right? But here they just mention like he hasn't seen him in a while, that he heard the disturbance as well. He came searching, and he doesn't know how long he's even been in there. And he goes, I just kind of wanted to help, but maybe I just want to go back to sleep. And he's the devil, the kettle hole devil is the one that calls her, half in, half out, which of course Pam takes umbrage with. But he agrees to kind of follow them along on their mission. And at a certain point, he has to stay behind because it starts going and getting snowier as they're getting closer to the center. And Pam reaches back into the green when they reach this blockage, and she sees a girl that in her past she lived in like this small town, and she could communicate with the plants, and she didn't know how. But anytime she was stressed out, she would go sit on the grass, and you kind of get the feeling that she came from an abusive household, because the dad comes out and says, I told you to mind your brother, you're worthless trash, but you're out here daydreaming amongst the flowers. So she ran away to Gotham. And as she's there, she ends up hitting rough times and ends up as a drug addict. And she gets kicked out of a shelter because, they don't take to addicts there, and ends up in this park where the trees have now overgrown. And in the cold winter when nobody was caring for her, it ended up that she, in her subconscious, reached out to the trees in this park. So they helped her. They protected her. And this is where Alec tells her, is like, this is, we're here to protect the trees. You're here for the person. You have to make a choice here. Who are you going to side with? And as they're going through, they run into another member of the Parliament who's the Jack in the Green, who I remember reading him in one of the series. I think it was The Soul, but I can't remember. He's another Swamp Thing guy who is also trying to preserve this entire forest, even if it means killing this girl, right? Pam ends up standing on this big hill that's also alive, that's also a member of the Parliament. So there's a lot of fun art here that Perkins is having, because the hill looks like this big green, like mossy outgrowth, but it has a face like Swamp Thing, and it talks to her. And each of these different Swamp Things has a different color, right? So Alex is orange, like we're accustomed to. Jack in the Green is like brilliant green. The kettle hole devil is a brownish. So there's a lot of fun here. But she stands on the hill, and that's where she realizes where there's a space that's open. And she goes out there, and as she's trying to reach through to this girl, she's trying to speak to her, to the green, all the vines and the trees start attacking her, to where Alec, in order to save Pam, just yells, "I've had enough." And when that happens, the girl kind of comes out of this tree, almost like she's in not like quite a cradle, but almost like a bed, right? And I got the vibe that Wilson is trying to put in here that she's on the verge of ODing, right? Because she was an addict, and the trees have been trying to preserve her because of her connection with them. And when Alec had said finally enough, and he finally gets control of the trees, Pam feels like she's dying. And Alex says, well, you have to let her go. She's not meant for this. This is why the trees are out of whack. This is why there's been so many deaths, is everything's out of balance. And so Pam essentially stays there with her and kind of comforts her as she's dying. And Pam's like, I was foolish enough to think that there was a happy ending, but I just should have known, you know. And Swamp Thing tells her the green doesn't save lives, right? We're here just to maintain balance, and balance has been maintained. And that makes Pam realize that, yeah, she's not a member of the green, right? Yes, she can communicate with it. Yes, she uses it. But this is where her and Swamp Thing differ, right? Is at the end of the day, Pam's trying to find her own balance, and that's more on the side of people, right? As the things that she's gone through since Willow's been writing is she went from trying to create this zombie virus that would take out people and preserve the earth to being like, well, no, maybe we can kind of tend to humanity like a garden, and we can find the balance that way. Versus Swamp Thing is like, no, you know, we put the trees first, we put the plants first. That, you know, this is what happens when humanity and us, you know, try to get along. We just can't. And so she cries out to Swamp Thing. She's like, you're not angry? You don't want revenge? And that's where he's like, no, I don't. I chose the forest. This is how it should be. And Pam stays there in the snow, you know, sitting. And again, Perkins is just killing it here. You know, the forest is done in shades of green with the snow falling, and the tree in which they found this woman in and Swamp Thing takes her back through is in a shadow. And it's very haunting. And the last page we get is Swamp Thing carrying her through this snowy forest, you know, the dead woman whose name was Paula. And he says, you know, the green's a perspective. That which falls in winter will rise again in spring. And, you know, and death is never the end. So yeah, he just leaves Pam sitting there, and he comes back through this thicket, you know, from which the women came. And a very, very haunting kind of story, and shows where Pam stands in all of this. And despite being set during the dead of winter, a lot of the imagery is very, you know, very fitting for the Halloween season. You know, a lot of these homicidal trees, very, very reminiscent of Evil Dead, right? But yeah, and just the way that Wilson makes the story, that doesn't make it fit because she wanted to tell the story, but it adds supplemental evidence to Pam and her story of being one of two worlds. Where Swamp Thing's made his choice, he'll never be human again, right? That's kind of his whole vibe. Whereas Pam's like, well, no, I can be both. I'm going to try to do both. And she's not rewarded here for her efforts, right? Because the girl still dies. She can't save her. But, you know, Pam's not going to let that shake her confidence in herself and whatnot. So a very good story. And again, Perkins' art doing Swamp Thing again, just perfect. So yeah, so I'm into this an 8.5.